This is part 3 of 9.1. We are going to solve this last equation by completing the square. And the first thing we have to do when completing the square is to divide everything by a. So I need to divide everything here by a3. That gives me r squared plus 4/3 r plus 4/3 is equal to 0. The next step is to get the constant on the other side, so I'm going to subtract 4/3 from both sides. R squared plus 4/3 r plus, leave myself a blank here, is equal to negative 4/3, and that's going to be plus the same blank, whatever that is. Okay. So we need to find this magic number. So I come off to the side and I take the coefficient of r, which is 4/3, divide it by 2 or multiply by 1/2. If I did multiply by half, this 2 and the 4 reduce to a 2, so this is 2/3. Now I take that 2/3 and I square it, which would be 4/9. So I'm going to add 4/9 to both sides. Okay, now this should be a perfect square trinomial, and it will factor as r, that's a plus, so this is a plus, and then the square root of this, which remember is always right here before you squared it. So r plus 2/3 squared is equal to, I need to do this calculation right here. My common denominator would be a 9, so I multiply that by 3 and that by 3, and I get negative 12/9 plus 4/9, and that will give me negative 8/9. Okay, so this is equal to negative 8/9. Okay, so now I have something squared equal to a number. I can take the square root of both sides, put the plus or minus right here. Okay, so I have r plus 2/3 is equal to, again, I'm going to think of this as two separate radicals, and I have plus or minus the square root of negative I over the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, well, I'm going to come over to the side and simplify the square root of negative 8. Well, I know I can pull an I out of that. So I get I square root of 8. But can 8 simplify? Yes, you probably have it memorized by this point because it comes up all the time. But 8 is 2 square roots of 2. So this is 2i square root of 2. Okay, so what I have is r plus 2/3 is equal to plus or minus 2i square root 2 over 3. Okay, now this looks very similar to the problem we had before. We have a common denominator. I need to move this over to here. And what I did in the last problem, which is I went ahead and combined it, and I would have done negative 2 plus or minus 2i squared of 2 over 3. But because I have an I, and the complex part, the imaginary part, and the real part of a complex number have to be separate, whenever I move that over, I cannot combine the fractions. I get r is equal to negative 2/3 plus or minus 2i square root 2 over 3. I'm not allowed to combine them into one fraction. Check each fraction and make sure it's in lowest terms, and this one is, so you have your two answers. They're just not very pretty. Okay, so I have negative 2 over 3 minus 2i square root 2 over 3, and negative 2 over 3 plus 2i square root 2 over 3. Okay, so let's recap where we are. We are solving quadratic equations, solving things like this. We have the factoring method, which is great when it works, or great when the factoring is easy to see. not so great otherwise. We have the square root property, which is pretty easy, but not everything is in the right form to use the square root property immediately. We have completing the square, which is very powerful and it will work on pretty much anything, but nobody really likes it, okay? But like I said, there are topics where you must know how to do this. You may be wondering if there's an easier way, if there is a method that will just always work and is not quite so ugly. And there is, and we're going to learn about it in the next section.